We had just set up a small family picnic in our backyard when our neighbor blared his truck horn repeatedly over the fence. I walked over politely and asked, "Could you please stop? We're just trying to celebrate." He laughed and said, "Maybe if you paid HOA dues like the rest of us, you'd deserve some peace." I later found out he had been telling everyone we were freeloaders, even though we had paid in full. Weeks later, someone dumped a bag of rotten meat over our fence. The smell took months to get rid of. My wife Julia and I bought our house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the spring. It was a 3-bedroom ranch with a decent yard. Big enough for our daughter, Abby 8, to play. Big enough for Scout, our golden retriever, to run around. We weren't rich. We'd worked our butts off to afford it. Saved every penny for years. When we finally closed, it felt like we'd crossed the finish line. The neighborhood seemed nice. Kids on bikes, people waving when you passed by. All the things you want for a young family. The only one who didn't seem happy to see us was Darren Fitch. He lived right next door in a big 2-story brick house. Early 50s. Gut hanging over his belt. Always a can of cheap beer in hand. He had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you'd done something wrong, even when you hadn't. The day we moved in, he didn't introduce himself. Just stood on his porch, arms folded, staring. Julia noticed. "Guess we've got the neighborhood welcoming committee," she joked. If only we knew. About 3 weeks after moving in, we decided to have a little family picnic. Nothing fancy. Just burgers, chips, some lemonade. It was one of the first nice Saturdays of the year. Abby was playing fetch with Scout. Julia set up a folding table. I fired up the grill. That's when Darren's truck horn started blaring. At first, I thought maybe he was working on the engine or something. But the horn kept going. Long, angry bursts that made Scout bark and Abby cover her ears. After the 3rd or 4th time, I walked over to the fence. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Could you maybe stop with the horn? We're just trying to have a family picnic." He leaned against his old Ford truck, a smirk spreading across his face. "Maybe if you paid HOA dues like the rest of us, you'd deserve some peace." I was confused. We did pay. Full amount. Got the receipt and everything. He laughed. Not a friendly laugh. More like he thought I was an idiot. "Sure you did." Then he walked inside, still chuckling. I tried to brush it off. Some people just like to cause trouble. But a few days later, things got weird. Neighbors who had smiled at us before now avoided us. One woman who'd introduced herself as Kathy crossed the street when she saw me walking Scout. Another neighbor, Ed, flat out ignored my wave. Then I got an email from the HOA president, Eleanor Ross. "Please remit outstanding dues or face penalties." I replied immediately, attaching the payment receipt. She wrote back. "Strange. Darren told us otherwise. I'll investigate." That investigation never seemed to happen. Instead, a week later, someone slipped a note into our mailbox. "Pay your share or get out." By summer, the hostility was getting harder to ignore. People stopped inviting us to neighborhood events. Abby came home crying after another child told her, "Your daddy's a freeloader." But the worst came one sweltering evening in July. We heard a thud against the fence. Scout went wild, barking like crazy. I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed Scout was sniffing and pawing at a trash bag near the back corner of the yard. The smell hit me like a punch to the face. Rotten meat. Maggots. Flies swarming. Someone had thrown a bag full of spoiled meat over the fence. Julia ran out behind me, pulling Abby back inside when she caught a whiff of the stench. We spent hours cleaning it up. Bleach. Scrubbing the fence. Disposing of the meat. But no matter what we did, the smell lingered. For weeks. No proof Darren had done it. But we knew. Who else would it be? Julia and I stayed up late that night after Abby went to bed. "This isn't just bullying anymore," she said, voice tight with anger. It's harassment. She was right. And I realized something else. Darren wasn't going to stop. He thought we were weak. Easy targets. I decided to show him otherwise. Step 1: Evidence. I bought 2 security cameras. One went under the eaves of our house, pointed at the backyard. The other I hid inside a fake birdhouse facing the fence. For weeks I recorded. Scout and Abby weren't allowed outside unsupervised anymore. At first, it was small stuff. Darren tossing beer cans over the fence. Yelling slurs late at night. But then, late August, he made a mistake. He threw another bag of rotting meat. This time, I caught it crystal clear on both cameras. His face. His arm hurling the bag. The whole thing. I didn't rush to the police. Not yet. First, I started attending HOA meetings. Quiet. Polite. I took notes. Darren didn't seem to notice me. Why would he? He thought I was just some weak, passive new guy. While he blabbed to everyone about how I was the problem, I dug into his past. Public records showed 2 previous harassment complaints at his last residence. Neighbors who'd moved away after incidents. Even better? He hadn't paid his own HOA dues in 3 years. He'd claimed financial hardship and talked the HOA into waiving his penalties. I gathered every document. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. I stood up calmly. I have something to share. People barely looked at me. They were used to tuning me out. Then I played the footage. Darren tossing the meat. The beer cans. The verbal abuse. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" I handed Eleanor Ross copies of the security footage and the HOA payment records. "Darren's been lying to you," I said. "We've paid every cent we owe. He's the one who hasn't paid in years." The room exploded in chatter. Darren's face turned beet red. He stood up, fists clenched. "This is bull." Eleanor cut him off. "Mr. Fitch, sit down." The HOA meeting didn't end quietly. Eleanor Ross, usually soft-spoken, slammed her gavel down so hard it startled even me. "We will have a special vote. Right now," she said. The vote wasn't close. Darren was kicked off the HOA board he'd somehow wormed his way into years ago. His unpaid dues and penalties were reinstated in full. Thousands of dollars. But if Darren felt shame, he didn't show it. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Julia squeezed my hand. "That won't be the end of it." She was right. For a few days, things were quiet. Almost peaceful. Then Scout got sick. At first, we thought it was just something he'd eaten in the yard. But when the vet ran tests, she found traces of antifreeze. Poison. Someone had deliberately poisoned our dog. Scout barely pulled through. The vet said another hour, and we might have lost him. Julia broke down crying in the parking lot. Abby hugged Scout so tight I thought she'd never let go. I knew who did it. But proving it? That was harder. The cameras didn't catch him this time. I wasn't going to let Darren win. If he wanted a war, he had it. I went back into public records. Dug deeper. Found out Darren had taken out a second mortgage on his house to cover gambling debts a few years back. The lender? A small, shady company known for aggressive collections. I also learned he was doing side work, unlicensed contracting jobs. Which is illegal in Pennsylvania without proper certification and insurance. I made a few calls. Quietly. Carefully. By the next week, 2 things happened. 1. The lender started foreclosure proceedings for unpaid dues and missed mortgage payments. 2. A state licensing board opened an investigation into Darren's unlicensed work. But that wasn't the best part. Eleanor Ross and a few other HOA members came to our door one evening. "We owe you an apology," she said. "And something else." They handed me a signed statement from 6 neighbors who admitted Darren had been spreading lies about us since the day we moved in. He'd told them we were squatters. At one point. Freeloaders. Criminals. All complete garbage. They agreed to testify if needed. It was more than I expected. Julia cried when she read the statements. Abby didn't fully understand but hugged us both. A week later, I came home from work to find the side of our house spray painted. Liar, cheat, fraud. Julia and Abby were inside, doors locked, terrified. I called the police immediately. An officer arrived, took photos, and promised to increase patrols. But I knew this was Darren's last card. His final tantrum before it all came crashing down. He'd lost his power in the HOA. The bank was after him. The state was investigating him. He was cornered. And a cornered man is dangerous. I bought more cameras. Reinforced the locks. Made sure Scout wasn't out of my sight. Because something told me Darren wasn't done yet. 2 nights after the vandalism, I couldn't sleep. I kept listening for sounds outside. Every creak in the house put me on edge. At 3:12 a.m., Scout started growling low by the back door. I grabbed a flashlight and quietly stepped outside. The air was heavy. No wind. Just the hum of distant traffic. That's when I saw him. Darren was at the far corner of our backyard, near the same spot where he'd dumped the meat. This time he had a gas can. He was going to burn our yard. Maybe the whole house. I didn't think. I sprinted toward him, yelling, "Get off my property!" He froze like a deer in headlights. Then, like the coward he was, he turned and ran back toward his property. But this time he wasn't fast enough. As he climbed the fence, his foot slipped. The sharp wooden plank tore through his calf as he fell back into our yard, the gas can spilling beside him. I grabbed my phone, hands steady. "Police are on their way, Darren." "You've done enough." He tried to stand but couldn't. Blood pooled under his leg. For once, he didn't have a smart remark. Just fear. The police showed up in minutes. They cuffed Darren while he still lay on the ground. He tried to say I'd attacked him, but my cameras had recorded everything: the trespassing, the gas can, the attempt to flee. One of the younger officers looked down at him. "Sir, you're lucky he called us. If he hadn't, and you'd set that fire, we'd be looking at attempted manslaughter charges." Darren was hauled off to the hospital first. Then to jail. I gave my statement. Julia and Abby watched from the living room window, Scout by their side. I finally exhaled. I thought it was over. But I was wrong. A week passed. Darren was charged with criminal trespassing, vandalism, attempted arson, and violating the restraining order. But then we got a knock at the door. It was Eleanor Ross. She didn't look apologetic this time. She looked ashamed. "We received a formal notice," she said. "Darren is suing you. Claims you provoked him, harassed him, and caused his injuries." I stared at her, stunned. "He's suing me?" She nodded. "I've never seen anything like it." Julia's face went pale. "Is this even possible?" Eleanor sighed. "In this country, anybody can sue anybody for anything. Doesn't mean he'll win. But it'll cost you time. And money." I called my lawyer. Thankfully, with all the video evidence and witness statements, he was confident we could crush Darren's lawsuit. But that wasn't enough for me anymore. Darren had dragged our family through hell. Poisoned our dog. Traumatized our child. Tried to burn down our home. And now, even from jail, he was trying to ruin us financially. It was time to end this. Completely. Julia and I sat down that night at the kitchen table. "I'm going to fight this," I said. "Not just defend against it. I'm going to make sure Darren can never hurt anyone again." She nodded. "We're with you." Scout barked softly, as if agreeing. Abby hugged me. "Make him go away, Daddy." "I will," I promised. And I meant it. The lawsuit Darren filed was weak, but it forced us into court. I sat down with my attorney, Greg Mathis, a sharp, no-nonsense guy from Mechanicsburg who had handled civil harassment and nuisance cases before. This isn't just a defense case anymore, Greg said. We have enough to file a countersuit. For harassment, emotional distress, property damage, veterinary costs for Scout, and punitive damages. Let's do it, I told him. I want him buried under this. Greg smiled. Then let's bury him. While Greg prepared our counter-lawsuit, I kept building our case. Security footage, I compiled every video into a clear timeline. Horn harassment, meat dumping, verbal abuse, the poisoning attempt, the arson attempt, witness statements. 6 neighbors willing to testify. Some added news stories of Darren threatening or intimidating them too. Financial records, I subpoenaed Darren's unpaid dues, mortgage defaults, gambling records, and licensing violations. But that wasn't all. The state licensing board's investigation wrapped up. Darren was permanently banned from contracting work and hit with a $25,000 fine. The foreclosure also moved forward. The bank set an auction date for his house. Piece by piece, Darren's life was collapsing. But it still wasn't enough. Not yet. The first day of court arrived. Darren showed up limping, legs still bandaged from the fence injury. He had a cheap, overworked public defender. Julia held my hand. Abby stayed home with her aunt. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Moreno, listened patiently as Darren's lawyer tried to paint me as the aggressor. That Darren had simply reacted to constant provocations. Then Greg stood up. Calm. Direct. Ruthless. He walked the court through the timeline. Played the videos. Showed the financial records. Read the witness statements. When he got to the poisoning attempt, the judge's face hardened. By the time Greg finished, Darren's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The judge recessed for an hour. During recess, something unexpected happened. A man approached me outside the courtroom. Late 30s, clean cut. You're the guy fighting Darren Fitch? He asked. I nodded cautiously. I'm a former neighbor of his. I lived next to him in Carlisle before he moved to Harrisburg. He did the exact same stuff to us. He handed me a folder. Photos. Complaint reports. A police statement. He forced my family to move. I never thought I'd get justice. But maybe you can. My hands shook as I accepted the folder. Thank you? He smiled. No. Thank you? I gave the folder to Greg. His eyes lit up. This just sealed the coffin. Back in court, Greg presented the new evidence. Darren's lawyer tried to object. Denied knowledge of Darren's past. Too late. Judge Moreno called it what it was, a pattern of harassment stretching back years. She dismissed Darren's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning he could never refile it. But she didn't stop there. She awarded us $148,000 in damages. Enough to cover legal fees, emotional distress, property repairs, vet bills, and punitive costs. And she recommended Darren face criminal charges for the poisoning and arson attempts. 2 weeks later, Darren's house was auctioned. Bought by a young couple who knew all about his history, and promised to tear down the old fence as their first project. The criminal case moved fast. Darren was convicted of trespassing, vandalism, animal cruelty, and attempted arson. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. I attended the sentencing hearing. Not because I needed closure. I just wanted him to see me. Julia and Abby stayed home. As they led Darren away in cuffs, he glanced at me. His eyes were empty now. No anger. No smugness. Just defeat. Scout fully recovered. Abby stopped having nightmares. Neighbors who had once ignored us now waved again. Some apologized. Others offered to help us rebuild the parts of the yard Darren had damaged. The new family next door put up a small wooden sign in their garden. Good fences make good neighbors. Great people make better ones. Julia smiled when she saw it. We had our peace back. But I kept the cameras up. Not out of fear. Out of caution. Once you've stared down a man like Darren Fitch, you never assume safety again.